Thank you, Carla. Good morning, church. Let me do a little quick housekeeping here. I need a little space today. Okay, today's sermon title is Ripsalis Bacifera. Common name? Thank you. Oh, Ed, I knew someone was going to ask, and I was hoping for that. I was hoping it would get your interest a little bit. It's an unusual title for a sermon. I'm going to try something a little different today, a little unusual, but it's okay. It's okay to go out and spread our wings and try different things at times. So today's going to be a wing spreading day. When I was a kid, I had developed an interest in plants, and cactus plants especially. When I was really small, they were very popular at the time when I was a kid. I was maybe 8 years old, and I went to the store with my parents, and they sent me home with a little tiny cactus plant, and I was thrilled. And over the years, I developed a passing interest. I'm not a botanist. I'm not a fanatic about this stuff, but I had developed an interest in it, and it carried me maybe until I was in my early 20s, and then when I got into my early 20s, work and life and other things kind of took me away from it. And I lost interest in it. But I found about a year ago, they're getting popular again, and you're starting to see cactus plants in stores. So I went and I bought one, and then I bought two. I have about 15 of them now, and that's about as many as I want to have. I really can't handle any more than that because I have to take them in the winter and bring them out in the summer. You know, they take maintenance. So 15 is a fine number for me, so please, I'm not looking for any more. But anyway, I have these plants, and, you know, we're told that all that you do to the glory of God, and I think even cactus collecting can have an aspect to it that comes to God's glory. You know, as a child growing up, and even today, I always felt that if God has planted plants on the dark side of the moon and we just haven't found them yet, I don't think they could be any more exotic than some of the things that grow right here, especially in the cactus family. They're really astounding things. I brought a few to help me today. Okay, we're going to do a little show and tell first. I have a few cactus friends I brought with me. And see if I can grab this without hurting myself. I don't know do we have anyone on the camera? Okay, I guess not. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm going to put it up here as best as I can. Pretty typically, if you were in the store and you saw one of these, I don't think anyone would say, gee, is that a tulip? Or what's that over there? That's some kind of pine tree. I think you'd pretty much recognize what it is, right? Right? If you look down at it from the top, it's got 5 flat sides. It doesn't have leaves on it. It has skin that's green because since it doesn't have leaves, the photosynthesis takes place in the stems themselves. If you look at the edges of it, it'll stick you. It's pretty much what I know the cactus plant to be, and what I guess all of you really think of when you think of a cactus plant is more or less something like this. Am I right? Okay, interesting in cactus plants. I only learned this year. I only learned part of this year. Cactus plants are all indigenous to the New World. They come from North America and South America. They don't naturally grow in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in Australia. They're not there. People have imported them since then, but they're not native to any of those places. They're only native to here with us, with North and South America. Except there is one oddball species that actually does grow that is native to Africa. But all the rest, the 1,750 species or so of cactus plants, all come from North and South America. I brought another one with me. Because you need more than one item if you're going to do show and tell, especially in church, right? Okay, here's another one. Anyone guess if you saw this in the store? These are sold. They're in the cactus section, you know, especially in the spring. They tend to stock up on these things in the spring when people are buying flowers and that. If you came into the store and you saw one of these, do you think you'd pretty much recognize it as being a cactus plant? This one had 5 flat sides to it. This one has 3 flat sides to it. If you're looking down from the top, it's got a leathery green skin. It's got some branches coming out off it. It doesn't have any leaves. And it has spines all along it here, stickers all along here. And if you play with it, it will let you have it. So This is our second one, right? The problem with this one, and this is where we're going to slowly start to get into our sermon today, is this is a cactus plant. It looks like a cactus plant. We recognize it to be a cactus plant, and it really is botanically in the cactus tribe. This one looks like a cactus plant. We recognize it to be a cactus plant, but this isn't a cactus plant at all. This comes from Africa. It's a whole different type of plant. It's a euphorbia, not cactus at all. It had fooled me. It took me a while. My daughters gave me this as a gift, and it took me a while to figure out what on earth is it. Because at first I thought it was another nice cactus plant. They bought it in the cactus section, but it was not. It's really a different thing. Let me get into Ripsalis baxifera. Are you ready for it? And this is really kind of the oddest thing. You probably haven't seen one of these in church in a while. There's actually a plastic one of these. These are called mistletoe cactus. There's a plastic one of these in the ladies' room. And the only reason I know it's in the ladies' room is that before anyone's here, I go run in on Sabbath mornings. I make sure there's paper in there and soap and stuff like that. Just so you know what I'm doing in the ladies' room, okay? But this, I knew some of you would, and I knew it would have started a whole, I'd be before the board before the year was out. But this is lovely. It really is. This is actually a cactus plant, but this thing wouldn't think of hurting you. It's a gentle, lacy kind of plant. It doesn't have leaves like the other ones also do not have leaves. This is not a great specimen. I was thrilled that I was able to find one of these anywhere. I found this on the internet, and it's still getting, filling into the pot. But they're really lovely plants if you're interested in this kind of thing. And the thing that really made me want this plant like crazy when I first found out about it is that out of the 1,750, almost 1,800 species of cactus plants, only one of them is native to Africa, and this is it. This is the only one that's indigenous to Africa, the only cactus plant. So I thought it was kind of an oddball to have, and I like oddball things. So this is strange in a lot of other ways. I'm getting tired. I'm going to put it down, if I may. That one's strange in other ways, okay? It's an epiphyte. You know what an epiphyte is? Some people here might. Some orchids in South America don't grow in the ground at all. They don't grow in dirt. They grow up in trees. They're epiphytes. They're tree growing. They live up in the trees without growing in dirt. This one's planted in dirt because I'm not going to climb up a tree and stick it in the tree limb, you know what I mean? But naturally, that's the way they grow. If you've been down south, or if you've ever seen pictures of Spanish moss hanging out of the trees, it's an epiphyte. It's not growing up out of the ground into the trees and hanging back down. It actually lives up in the trees. So for a cactus plant, this thing's almost ridiculous. It doesn't fit the norm of anything that you would normally think of as a cactus plant. But it is. It really is. So let me make sure I haven't missed anything here yet. I don't think so. So what do we have up here? Okay, why did I bring this in for a sermon? I have a cactus plant that is a cactus plant, and I have a plant that looks exactly like a cactus plant, and everyone thinks it is a cactus plant, but it's not a cactus plant at all. And I have another plant that nobody in their right mind would name as being a cactus plant, but it is. And what we really have here is a little microcosm of the church and the people in it. It's a little view of the world. It's an allegory for what we really face, because in the church, we have some wonderful Christians who look like Christians, and God looks into them, and he sees his Christian son and daughter. And we have other Christians who come to church and look polished and look like perfect Christians, but inside, they're not Christians at all. And we have, even more interestingly, like the Ripsalis, we have Christians that we never recognize these people as being Christians. That's not what a Christian is like in my mind. And maybe they come from the wrong place, and maybe there's all sorts of things going on that causes us not to recognize. Maybe they have long hair and tattoos and piercings and all kinds of things going on that we absolutely know are wrong as Christians. But God looks at them, And the question is, what does God see? Does God see a Christian? Or does he see something that's really out there and quirky and doesn't belong at all? What makes a cactus plant a cactus plant? Okay? It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, if you have the variety here, some of them you're going to name right away. You're going to see, you're going to say, that's a cactus plant, and you're going to be right. But what makes a cactus plant a plant is not just the way it looks externally. There are internal structures and internal physiology of the plant. And the way that physiology is determines whether or not it's a cactus plant. That's why this one is, and this one isn't, because this doesn't have the right stuff inside. But this one does. The point here is I know which is a cactus and which isn't, not because I'm a great expert or the expert on cactus plants. Someone who is an expert told me. You can look them up on the internet. So when it comes to cactus plants, you really need, the only way you can tell which is and which isn't is you need an expert. What about with Christians? Let's get into our scripture verse. Our scripture verse was 1 King 8:39. Then hear thou in heaven thy dwelling place, and forgive and do and give to every man according to his ways, whose heart thou knowest, for thou, even thou only, knowest the hearts of all the children of men. I'm going to add a companion verse to that. I'm going to read from 1 Chronicles 28:9, which says, in part, for the Lord searcheth all hearts, and understandeth all the imaginations of the thoughts. See, just like I can't look into these cactus plants, I can't look into someone else's thoughts, and I can't look into someone else's heart, although sometimes people pretend that they can. There's only one being who can do that, and it's not me, and it's not a botanist somewhere, it's God. And as we need experts to tell us who the cactus plants are, in determining who the Christians are, God's the expert, and God's the one who will determine. Okay, so what have I done? I've taken these three plants, and I drew an allegory between these three plants and the church and the people who are in the church. Where do we go from here? What am I going to do for the next, 20, 30 minutes? Well, I think there's a lot of places we could go from here. Okay, I think there's a lot of stories contained in here, and I think this little sample could be used as an explanation for many things. I know where I'm going to take it. We're going to look a little bit at the heart, at thoughts, and at our inability to tell them apart. And we're going to look at it not just through Gene up here talking, but through Scripture. What if we, instead of being here today, we were back in Palestine, and we were back during the time of the Bible, or 1,000 years before Christ, and we were living and going through the things that the Israelites went through? David, remember David? Samuel was told to anoint someone in Saul's place. Samuel was told that he was to go to the house of Jesse and to anoint one of his sons, but he wasn't told which one. Samuel had already prophesied to Saul, but now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. But Samuel couldn't tell who this person was either. Samuel had no way of knowing whose heart was with God or not, even if he knew that it was among the children of Jesse. He didn't know which one was chosen because he couldn't see inside. Reading from 1 Samuel 16, 6 and 7. And it came to pass when they were come, that he, and he here is Samuel, looked on Eliab and said, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. He saw the first son that Jesse brought to him. And he said, this has got to be the guy. The Lord hasn't told me yet, but I know this guy has to be it. What do you think has to be the next king? What do you think it was that he saw in Eliab that led him to think that this was the next king? This had to be it. King was a military leader in those days. He was expected to lead Israel to war. Maybe Eliab was a strong-looking guy. Maybe he had a very determined look in his face. Maybe he was handsome. Maybe he had a look of humility about him. Maybe he looked like a good warrior. Maybe he was this great, big, tall, beefy guy who would scare the daylights out of you if you saw him on the subway one day, you know? I don't know, but there was something about Eliab that when Samuel looked at him, he said, this is him. I know, this has got to be the guy. Second part I'm reading, 1 Samuel, the second verse, 7. And it came to pass when they were come, that he, Samuel, looked in, I'm sorry, I just read that. I'm reading the second verse now. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, nor on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. Why? For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on what? On the outward appearance. But the Lord looketh on the heart. God knows every heart in here. Samuel couldn't see Eliab's heart. And we really, there's an old saying, you can't tell a book by its cover. It's really true. Some people have what you call charisma. They're very charismatic. And some people can lead Christians in very strange directions. It doesn't mean that they're God's people. It means there's something about them we find attractive on an outside view. It's like trying to determine if a plant has the internal structures that would make it a cactus without knowing the plant's physiology. Only God can see into our physiology. Only God can see our hearts. Only God can see our thoughts. King Saul, David had a predecessor, right? King Saul. And the people were asking God for a king, someone who would fit their view of what a king should be. Samuel warned them what would happen. Do you remember any of the things that was going to happen to them? I wonder if I have my Bible. Yes, I do. I'm going to read just very quickly from 1 Samuel, 1 Samuel 8. This is Samuel telling the people what's going to happen if they continue on seeking a king. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s, and will set them to ear the ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectioners, and to be cooks, and to be bakers, and will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he goes on with what this king is going to do to them. And they still want a king. They want someone who looks like what they wanted someone to look like. They had, prior to the kings, they had been ruled by prophets, and the prophets were ruled by God. But that's not what they wanted anymore. They wanted it to look right. They weren't happy with God looking at the heart and God knowing the thoughts of the person. They wanted someone who looked right. They wanted to have a good-looking king, too, like the nations around them. 1 Samuel 8, 19, and 20, I'm reading. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we will also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. They couldn't read the thoughts, and they couldn't read the heart, but they wanted someone who looked the part. What about being in the past, being a Christian, being in Palestine about 2,000 years ago, and being at the day of Calvary, and being there and seeing the crucifixion of Christ? When Christ was crucified, there was a thief hung by either side of him. And the people, the malefactors who were being crucified with Christ, unlike Christ, they were guilty. They were guilty, and under the Roman law, they deserved the punishment that they were facing. They deserved to be crucified. And I think if you had seen them, they had been in a dungeon for a period of time, they must have looked really horrible. They must have been filthy and smelled and hadn't run a comb through their hair, and they were in the process of being executed, the process of being killed, because we execute people quickly, but the Romans didn't execute people quickly. And they're hanging on the cross. And a conversation starts between them. And then the conversation in Luke 23, verses 42 and 43, the conversation turns to Christ. And he, the thief, said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee today, thou shalt be with me in paradise. Do you think any of us would have chosen that thief and said, boy, look at that thief. I'll bet I can look at him and see there's someone who's going to be in the kingdom. I don't think I would have. I don't think he outwardly showed anything that would recommend him to us as being a Christian, as being one of God's children. That Jesus could look on his heart. Jesus saw things in that thief that we could never see, that we would have never seen because we only look at the outside. Okay, remember Saul of Tarsus, right? He was officiating at the death of Stephen, the first Christian martyr. Would anyone here have picked Saul if we were Christians and we had known Saul's history? Would any of us wanted to go and bring an evangelistic flyer over to Saul's house and tell him about the Lord? I wouldn't. I'd be afraid for my life. And I don't think any of us would. But God knew that Saul could be changed. God knew Saul's heart. And he knew Saul's personal hidden thoughts. And he knew that in Saul was one of his children. Matthew and Zacchaeus, they were thieves. They were tax collectors. They were traitors to their own people. They were helping the Romans subjugate the Jews. They had soldiers there. Matthew, where he was, he had soldiers there. And the soldiers, I'm sure, were more than glad to beat people up and break their legs if they didn't pay the toll, the tax toll that you had to pay coming in. And Matthew would say, well, you owe this much and you owe that much and somebody else owes that much, based on how much he thought he could get out of the person. Would anyone here have picked Matthew? Matthew to go on an evangelical campaign with? To make him one of the apostles? I wouldn't have. Because there was something about Matthew that I couldn't see, but that God did see. There's more. What about the woman at the well? Jesus is sitting there alone in the hot part of the day, and he's getting thirsty. And a woman who's had a long string of living with guys and breaking up with them and moving in with someone else, has a long history of this, comes over towards him, and he begins a conversation for him. Most of the good, perfect elders I know wouldn't think of talking to her, at least not in public. Be careful what you do, because we couldn't see the heart and we wouldn't know what to do. But Jesus knew that he had met her right at the point where she was ready to change, where something was happening in her heart and something was happening in her thoughts, but nobody else could have known it. If you had been in the town and been one of the men or women who knew her and just been one of the town folk with her, you would have never thought so. She's the last person in the world you thought would ever change. Like identifying the difference between a cactus plant, a cactus wannabe plant, and something that looks nothing like a cactus but really is. We just can't tell. We can't tell who are God's children and who aren't. We play games sometimes. I know some people, we used to play games more when the kids were younger than we do now, but we play games. There's a lot of Christian games out there. And there's a game that we play that I think ties right into this. And this was kind of something I really wanted to discuss at least a little bit today. I think all of us already know how to play this game. I think we all play the game at some times. My wife, Paulette, plays the game. I play the game. And sometimes in those really honest moments between a husband and wife, because the truth is that nobody really knows me other than God the way my wife knows me. And no one can speak to me the way Paulette can speak to me, because the many years of marriage bind you together differently. And the same thing is true the other way. I can speak to Paulette about things and in a way that nobody else could speak to her, because I'm her husband. The game involves taking, and we talk about our playing of the game, and we actually chastise each other sometimes in a loving way, saying, are you playing the game? Are we going to play the game tonight? Do you really want to pick that up? Do you really want to play this game? I'm going to tell you what the game is. The game is that we take things that we see, we take things that we hear, we take things that we feel, we take things that we smell, we take our past experiences, and we put them all together, and we take all of this information and we form a judgment about someone else. Maybe someone in the church, maybe someone in our family, maybe someone outside at work. What do you call it? Remember what this very popular game is? The kids play it a little differently. The kids play it connecting the dots. How many people here play connect the dots? Know what the game is, right? You get a sheet of paper, it's got a bunch of dots on it, and if you connect the dots in the right way, what do you get? You get a bunny rabbit. Maybe you get a bunny rabbit with 3 ears, depending upon how good you are at the game. But by connecting all these different dots, you get a picture of what something is. When we play it as adults, the dots we use are data points. It's just little pieces of information we get about people. And we start to use the information we're getting about this and that and the things we've seen over the years, and we start to put together a picture of someone. Now, I can put together a picture of what you did. I can say you did this, you did that, you did the other thing, but I don't know your heart. I can't put together a picture of your heart, and I can't put together a picture of your motives or what you were thinking at the time. But I do sometimes, and Paulette does sometimes. And I had a really, really great conversation with a member who's a friend of mine also. And we've had a pretty honest conversation about things we do wrong, and about connecting the dots, and about drawing conclusions about people just by what we see. And really, that's what judging is. And I do it. And this brother in the church, who was speaking very honestly with me also, we were talking about, he does it too. And he's actually trying not to do it, and I've been trying not to do it, and I know Paulette's trying not to do it. And the reason I think we all do it is that I've lived in the church long enough, and I know the things that people have said to me, sometimes about me, sometimes about other people in the church. I know the things that come back and come around, and they go far beyond things simply as saying, Gene stood up, Gene broke the window. You can say that. If I break the window, you can say I broke the window. That's a simple fact. But you can't say Gene hates the church, and so he broke the window. Because you can't tell. You can't see. None of us can. I think it's one of the most unhealthy things we play. You know, Paulette and I have a joke between us. And the game where you talk about connecting the dots, we talk about connecting the dot. You know what that is? That is when you get one piece of information about someone, and you just take that one dot and you start drawing this great vision around it as to what that person thought, as to what that person did. And you create this great thing about who that person is or what they're doing based on the one dot. Play the game with me for a minute, okay? I know you're having trouble with this, but play the game for a minute if you can. It's you. And you're coming into church, and you're coming in church through the back door, and it's better weather than this, and our flowers are out. Aren't they beautiful? We have the flowers in the pots. And as you're walking into church, Jane Doe is in front of you, 30 feet in front, 40 feet in front. And as Jane walks by the pots, she reaches towards the pot, and she puts a hand in it. Now, she's a little far away. You can't see exactly what she did, but you saw her put her hand in that pot. But who cares? There's no big deal in that. Then the next week comes, and same thing, Jane is in front of you, and you're walking in, and Jane's walking in, and she does it again. She puts a hand in the pot. A little weird. Now I have some data points to work with to start my drawing. Third week comes, and Jane puts her hand in the pot. Now, I can't see what she's doing. She's a little too far away. But every week she walks by the pot, her hand's in the pot. But I know Jane, so I put the story together. And I say, boy, look at Jane, though. Isn't she wonderful? You know, she loves this church. Look at how much Jane cares about this church. You know, I think every week when she comes into church, she brings a little fertilizer with her and puts it in the plant. And she does that because she loves plants and wants to see them grow. And she loves this church and wants it only to look its best. And that's my story. Now, we're playing this game together, people. That's my story about Jane Doe. But while you were coming in and I was coming in behind Jane Doe, there was someone else coming from the other direction towards our back entrance and saw the same things we saw. And that person, you know what their picture was, what their story was? I always wondered about that Jane Doe. I think, and now this may sound weird to you, but I've seen it, I think she's poisoning our plants. Every week, I'm telling you, I see it. Last week, that plant in the front, it just didn't look so good anymore. And I'm telling you, I think Jane is poisoning the plants. But then, of course, there's always another opinion when you get down in this, and someone else comes along and realizes you're both nuts. Jane's stealing dirt. No, every week a little handful. Before you know it, you have a whole pot. Jane's a dirt thief. I wonder what's wrong with it. Do you think this runs in her family? Oh, it's a danger. It could be. We call it something else, We call it when we do it. If we do it all the time, we call it being paranoid. We make up these stories about what people are doing. And it's as unhealthy to the people that we're making up the story about as it is to us. And we can't. We are hopeless to tell what the person is really doing. Time. Okay, I'm going to leave some stuff out of this because I think some of you are having trouble with this, and I think that I don't want to hear too much snoring. But what we're told, Romans 2:1, I'm going to touch on a couple of verses I wanted to hit before we finally close this down. Romans 2:1, therefore thou art inexcusable, O man, whomsoever thou art that judgest, wherein thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself. And here's the key, for thou that judgest does the same things. We're in Nehemiah, this is another verse, companion verse to it, Nehemiah 6:8. Then I sent to him saying, no such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. In our little Jane Doe story, with the one person thinks Jane is great, and the other person thinks Jane is horrible and killing the plants, and another person thinks she's stealing dirt. In our little Jane Doe story, no one could tell, but what they were doing, they're telling you things about themselves and about the way they view life and about the way they view the people that they come across. Because in the stories that we make up and little fantasies we put together, it's like a Rorschach test where you look at the ink blots and they don't say anything. But you put a story up to what these ink blots say, it's like ink blots. We're telling the world who we really are. We're promised, I'm getting near the end, and we're not going to go on too much longer, but Scripture actually promises us that we're going to get it wrong. I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians 8:2, at least that we're not going to get it completely right. 1 Corinthians 8:2 says, and if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know it. Even when you think you know something, you didn't get it quite right. And that's what Scripture says. That's not me making this up. Okay. The point here is that you hurt people. And we hurt our relationships with people when we start deciding why they're doing things. We can say, I saw Jane put her hand in the flour. But if she didn't tell me why, I don't know why. And I have no right to say she's putting her hand in the flour because. We not only hurt the people that we make these stories up about, we hurt ourselves because we limit our ability to communicate and to be really brothers and sisters to other people whom we're injured with these fantasies. Our hearts, Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Can anyone here know our hearts? Do we even know our own hearts? Anyone claim here to truly know himself completely? How on earth could we ascribe motive to what? The actions that we see somebody else do, when half the time we don't even know ourselves why we did stuff. Okay. I'm closing. And I'm really just about at an end, but I share a little story. Someone once came to me and told me something. Sometimes people tell me things, and I really honestly go out of my way not to hear them and not to want to hear them. But sometimes people get you quickly. Hey, let me tell you about blah, 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 and they're gone, and you heard it. You didn't want to hear it, but you heard it. Someone came to me once and said, Look at so-and-so. You know, so-and-so is never going to change. And boom, they went away. How do you know so-and-so is never going to change? I have to tell you, the thing that so-and-so was doing wasn't such a big deal wrong anyway. But this person had watched so-and-so and made up stories about so-and-so for who knows how many years and decided that so-and-so is never going to change. I don't know who's going to change. I tell you, I hope to the Lord that I change, because I know that I'm not fully there, and I may not be the only one in this church who sometimes sees things wrong with themselves and sees shortcomings and sees thoughts that shouldn't be there and sees a heart that is wicked, because I've certainly found it in my life. The church, I love you. This is not, my favorite sermon is in turn not this sermon. My favorite sermon is not a sermon that has anything negative in it. My favorite sermon is salvation. Jesus loves you, what Jesus has done in our lives. But there is a point when we're living together, when we have to think a little bit about our own actions for our own health. We have to think a little bit also about not judging the actions of our friends and our brothers and our sisters. So, church, this was kind of a little bit of a quirky sermon, but I'm not afraid to take, as you know, I'm not afraid to take the occasional considered risk. So I thank you. I thank the youth church for putting up with me. I thank you for not trying to see my heart and for not trying to fathom out my thoughts and for taking me at face value for what you see. You'll see enough real thoughts that say face value with me that you don't have to go digging and making too many up. So God bless you, church, and thank you. And Carlisle, I think we're ready if you're going to come up. God bless you, church.